In this video, we're going to be drawing a nose in 3/4 view, and unlike the videos prior, our focus here will be the rendering of form and synthesizing the knowledge we've acquired thus far to create a realistic looking nose. The first stage will consist of a linear lay-in. I'm looking first to create an envelope shape for the nose made up of the 4 major planes and using that as a guide for all my decisions going forward. Based on the orientation of the nose, I can see that the side plane on the right hand side is foreshortened and so will be thinner than the side plane on the left. The nose is also angled toward the right, so the line of symmetry running down the middle will not be perfectly vertical. Beyond that, I can't stress enough the importance of keeping your lines light so you can adjust them as you go. Mistakes at this point are likely, so we want to keep our drawing open. Once I'm happy with my planar nose, I progress to indicating the major forms of the wings and septum, limiting myself to straight lines and using the wireframe of our planar nose to guide the placement of my marks. I'll also lightly indicate the bedbug line as well as the location of the highlight and boundaries of the nose bridge. As you draw the septum and wings, remember that they curve inward into the nostril to create a specific kind of rhythm between the 3 parts. The shapes are also not circular, but a combination of straights, curves, and the accompanying angle breaks. Right above the cast shadow, we have the form shadow. On the whole, it's lighter than the cast shadow and can be separated into a core shadow and reflected lights. My approach here is to first create an average form shadow value that's a bit lighter than the cast shadow. As I do that, I make sure to lighten up the value slightly as I move towards the left and preserve the bottom of the form shadow to serve as my reflected light. If I find that an area has gotten too dark, like seeing the reflected light, I'll lighten it with my eraser till the values I see are in conformity to my reference. I suggest squinting your eyes and darting them back and forth between your drawing and your reference to better see the differences between the two. Despite the variety of values you see in the shadows, you will find that even the lightest parts are darker than the darkest halftones. This complete separation of light and shadow is an axiom of realism and one that must be followed for our work to appear 3-dimensional. We are basically done with the shadows for now. Beginning in order from darkest to lightest, we have the occlusion shadow under the nostrils, the rest of the cast shadow, the core shadow, and the reflected lights. The extremes of our value scale have been established, with the shadows representing one end of that spectrum and the white of the paper the other. In modeling my halftones, I prefer to start with the darkest ones. In this case, that would be the values in the rightmost side plane of the nose. Getting an average value of this region is my first goal, and making sure that the tone is both even and lighter than our lightest shadow value. After that, I'll darken parts of that base tone to represent this downward facing minor plane and lighten the parts which are receiving the most light. As I begin to model the form in the left wing of the nose, foremost on my mind is the relationship the values here will have to the rest of the halftones already existing. The average value of this region is going to be lighter than the values on the right maxilla and the crease on the left wing. The transitions between the lightest and darkest halftones here must be soft and should merge optically when you squint your eyes. The forms of the nose for the most part turn very slowly, so outside the nostril and a couple of spots on the outside border of the wings, we don't want any hard edges. The left maxilla of the nose has a local value that's a bit lighter than that of the left wing, so we can use the area we just completed as a measuring stick to ensure that we don't go off track in this region. I'm doing my best to bridge the gap between the two forms, utilizing the right intermediate values and paying attention to the value shapes that separate the bridge from the maxilla. At this point, I feel comfortable indicating the highlight on the nose bridge. As I alluded to earlier, this plane is the lightest plane in our picture and the highlight is the lightest value within it. Be careful not to exaggerate the scope of the highlights. It's a part of the nose bridge, not the entire thing. In addition, the process of creating the highlights will necessarily create some hard edges, so remember to go back in with your pencils and soften those transitions. Before I call it quits with this drawing, I'm going to comb through each section individually and look for shapes to improve, edges to enhance, and values to correct. It's important to be patient and really look closely at your reference to spot those inconsistencies in your drawing that had escaped your attention prior. Once you reach a place where you're satisfied, you can certainly add your own artistic flair, or maybe even decide that you want to deviate from the reference more significantly. Rome was not built in a day, and good drawing does not come to us overnight. An attitude of continuous improvement, asking the right questions, and a willingness to try and try again is the only way we can make progress. My goal with this drawing was to illustrate to you the end product of a study of structure and anatomy vis-a-vis the nose. Doubtless, I still have a long way to go, but every bit of extra knowledge informs our drawing decisions and helps us to be more competent at what we do. That's it for this one. In the next video, I'll be going over the class project and the exercises that will get you to better drawing.